that will have a new winner. So the winner is CMS Gtfour.
CMS Gtfour.
Hey all, and welcome back. And you heard right, in that little clip you guys just saw, I won Konig's contest. And what that contest was, is they had some videos where they had some questions, you had to answer all the questions, and the people who answered the questions right got put in a drawing, and one of them won wheels, and it was me. I actually got to win a wheel of my choice from the Konig line, and I'm actually really excited because there's a wheel that they've had, I've been a fan of, and I think it would make an awesome racing wheel. It's also give me a chance to sort of change up the look. And I know I've gotten other wheels in the past and other things I kind of want to switch up, but I really didn't have anything that was super light. And I think this is going to be a better move and approach. So what we're doing today is we're going to unbox it, we're going to weigh it, and then we're going to test fit it. And worst case scenario, if things don't fit, I've got some studs that are extended and I've got some spacers. So there's a good chance we have to run the spacer anyway, just because of my tire size. The wheels will clear, but the extra rubber tends to hit the inner frame area a little bit. So let's go ahead and get this thing open, get some weights, and then see how it looks on the car. So here's what the box came today, and I just want to go through how things are packed with their stuff. So go ahead and open it up. I'm wearing gloves because it just came today, and trying to minimize any kind of contamination. I usually let things sit for a few days. So with the top layer open, I can actually discard these, and then we can open up the inside because we're just worried about surface contact. So already immediately we've got these cardboard bits here to help keep some distance from being smashed. Take those out. Take this out, because what I like to do is I use this for setting my wheel. I never like to lay it on the floor. Okay, so within here, there's a couple more of those. The cap is taped to the inside. We can get this box out of the way. We've got this bag on here, and it's tied loose enough where we can just untie it and reuse the bag, which is nice because often when you get something in the bag gets destroyed. And so I like to give things inspection as we're going through this. So this looks good, just a little bit of the finish. Yeah, check the whole lip. You see a little bit of finish scuffs on this lip, but nothing major, especially since going on the inside. And we've got this cover here. So this is reminiscent a lot of Enki's, how they send their wheels, which is nice. I've bought wheels in the past that have come in very bad boxing, and they look like they've thought this out in regard to shipping. So this is a 17x9, 40 offset, 5x114 because I've changed my hubs. But you can get this same wheel in a 5x100. That's also related to some plans that I'll be doing with later. So I guess it's time for the reveal. But we've got this cover here for Konig, and they have this little piece of foam that goes in there to help protect the lip. So we're gonna open this up, see what the wheel looks like, and then do a little inspection. And that looks really good. So this is the Hypergram, and this is their new machined lip version. And I do like the version that had been out before. I probably would have gone with a bronze or a graphite to go with the car. But when I saw this polished lip on the Supra that they'd shown, I was sold into it. So I'm just gonna inspect the lip real quick. So far everything's looking good. And then just look at the finish. This looks really sharp. I like how they have these 3 screws for the center cap instead of having to pop it in and pop it out like the other ones I've had. And they've got lightning holes in here. Really recessed hub. That's a pretty interesting design, and it looks like it's very forward for brake clearance. So I'm gonna grab the scale and we can see how this thing weighs. So here I have my nail scale, and it is extremely accurate. I've compared it to other shipping scales, and it's right on down to the fraction of an ounce. So it's, you know, give or take a little bit of that, but for the most part, it's pretty dead on. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna turn it on. Hold the wheel up. Actually, I'm gonna turn it off. We put this on here because we want it to zero with the cardboard on. So turn it on as it loads. I can set the wheel on the cardboard so that we have an even mounting surface. We've got our beep, and we can check the weight. It is 17 pounds and 11 ounces on the dot. So that is pretty close to advertised. But this will save me around 4 pounds per wheel on each corner. And I've already shaved 12 pounds off the spindle from my brake design in the front. And there's other plans for possible other spindles I'll be doing the shaving more. So unspring weight, there's a lot of advantages going here. So now let's work on getting this mounted to the car. Now, in addition to testing in the car, I'm going to show you guys a little bit of a trick. I've got a camera set up here on a tripod, and I'm going to do a little bit of Photoshop because I don't know when I'm going to have a chance to put the tires on. I want to see how it looks in the car. And really the thing is, when you're doing a Photoshop, you need everything to be in the proper angles and alignment with the vehicle that you're test fitting. And this wheel that I picked is new enough to where there's not that many pictures that I can find a good enough angle in the size that I want to test it on the car. So what I've got set up here, got a camera and a tripod. Most cases you want to use a remote shutter, but since this is going to be a pretty basic Photoshop, I'm not entirely worried about it. But you want everything to stay the same angle. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get a shot of the car, then I'm going to lift it, put the wheel on, get shots of the wheels on, and then I'll be able to use that to Photoshop it together, and you guys can get an idea of what this is going to look like when it's done. So let's get to it. So I've got my initial picture, got everything set, got my wheel over here, want to break my bolts. Always use a torque wrench. I don't know if everyone does. I mean, taking them off is not as much of an issue, but when you put them on, for sure, because you want it to be evenly torqued across the whole hub and to the right spec. So got everything loosened, parking brakes on, I'm gonna get it jacked up. Always work safe. Alright, jack stands lined up. And then I never rely on the jack, especially since I use the center support. Always rely on the jack stands. Unless they're from Harbor Freight. Already, I already have a 3mm spacer on there, making that a 35 offset. It's the E238. And the reason I have this is because the tires hit inside here, just barely on full lock, and it's just one of those things I want to avoid. One of these days I'll do a video on this brake setup. So let's get this out of the way. So I want to do a dry test solely with no spacer first. Now with the wheel mounted, this is mounted flush to the brake, no spacer, just the adapter ring, and look at how much brake clearance I have. My other wheels, the 050s, are really good at brake clearance, especially compared to my other wheels I have. And this just kills it as far as being able to clear the caliper, fits well. I have a 5mm spacer I'm going to throw in here just because of tire clearance with the size tires I like to run. But yeah, this is awesome. This is more than I expected at this offset, how well it clears the brakes, because most big brake kits for this car create a challenge in the front because they're a lot more outboard than a lot of the brake kits because you have to clear that ball joint. So wow, this is awesome. So I'm gonna get my picture and then we can work on getting this down and getting the rears. All right, so now I have the back jacked up on stands, most of the lug nuts off, and a chock in my front wheel because when the back's up, you don't have the assistance of the parking brake. Now I'm already sure that the face of the caliper will clear. What I'm more concerned about is the wheel diameter. Largely because these rear brakes are a larger diameter in the fronts because they're from the 205. Now, I do have one RPF1, which I was originally planning on using. However, it does not clear my front brakes, so I can keep it as a spare to put on the rear if I ever get a flat, which I've been lucky so far. I'm not terribly worried about this. I do have one concern. It's not a big concern. If you look back here, you can see the pad of the mounting surface, and you can see that on these cars, due to the distance of the rear axle, you actually have to use a spacer on the rear to make it even with the front. That or run a different offset wheel. And so I like to run the same size all around because I can rotate tires and all that. So there is a recessed pad that allows for possible lug nuts, I'm hoping. Something's catching. I'm not entirely sure what. Yeah, I think that these lug nuts are actually a little too long on the back here. I considered cutting the studs down anyway, but since this is a lower offset wheel, I think I'm clearing my suspension, it would seem, so that's all good. I have another thicker spacer that I can actually put on here that doesn't have the lug issue. So once I set my camber and everything, this shouldn't be an issue. So what I'm gonna do is loose fit it here just to get the picture. And now I know, and it looks, visually, it looks like it's probably another, I would say 3mm for total clearance. So I could either cut the studs 3mm, which isn't a terrible thing, or I can come back and use the other spacer, which is a 25, and this is, I think, a 17 I had made because once I switched to those new tires, the BFG, I can't think what they are off the top of my head, but when I switched to those BFGs, they were actually a little bit wider than my previous tire, even though they were the same specs. So I'm gonna get this mounted up, we'll get our picture, and then we'll do some Photoshop magic. All right, so I have my 3 images open. They're all shot at relatively the same exposure, but one problem that has occurred is that we have a storm that's hitting, and the clouds started coming over by the time I got the last photo. The color's probably a little bit darker on the rear photo because it was getting blown out the way it was being exposed. And so I found one that I think works well enough to show the detail of the wheel. So we go to our rear photo, we've got our front photo, and then we have our main photo that is going to be superimposed in. So what I've done here is I've gone ahead and used the pen tool and create a path to allow me to select the wheel to get it, I feel like, a little bit more accurate than using some of the built-in tools. So we can just copy that, and then we have that pasted over here as our rear wheel. And then we go over here, and I've done the same thing. We've got our path tool, which we've turned into a selection. Copy this wheel, and then it's pasted here. I've got it as the front wheel. And you can already see that it looks like it belongs here. And that's the great thing about trying to do your pre-shoot when you're doing the Photoshop, to get everything as right as you can, because it's easier to fake. If you're going through and selecting images offline, which I usually do, I'll find a wheel that's close enough to the angle of a photo I already have, and I'll try to put it. Sometimes you can't always pull it off, especially since you have all these different depths on a wheel, which kind of get flattened once you start changing the perspective of the image. One thing you'll notice on this rear wheel is that it looks like I've had a little bit of positive camber going on, and what that is a result of the wheel hanging from the air and the suspension drooping, and there is a camber change occurring. So that is giving the impression this is a little bit higher camber than it should be. So in realistic, it would be pretty vertical compared to this. But I think this is close enough to see that these wheels are going to look pretty good on the car. I think it's a nice improvement. They're going to be lighter. It's going to give me a new look. I have better brake clearance. Other than a couple of tweaks I'll have to make with the spacers and maybe a little of camber adjustment and stuff like that, which I need to do anyway for better track setup. I'm pretty happy. And I think once I put the body kit on here, it's going to all tie together. Now, one other thing I've captured, I have taken a Konig center cap image to put on here that I'll use for my thumbnail so we can sort of keep the wheel mystery until we get to the unboxing, as you guys have seen. But now looking at it, you know, if Konig decided they wanted to make a turbo fin to go on their wheels, it would be pretty cool. I would definitely be down to throwing something like that on there if they want to send me one. And speaking of Konig, I really appreciate that they've done this contest, and I'm so happy that I was selected the winner because I was already digging these wheels. I'm happy that I got picked out of the random selection. I mean, there was some work that would involve because I had to do a bunch of research to get their questions and watch, you know, all their videos. And I'll put a link to their channel in the description below. But like always, thanks for watching. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. And I'll see you all next time.